Class, welcome back. This is the final video in our watercolor cactus tutorial. By this point, your watercolor flower should be dry. Of course, I can't always wait for mine to dry all the way, but it's just a little center of my large flower to the left. So we are going to create a tall cactus and a short cactus next to one another. I want you guys to think about the shape of a cucumber and the shape of a tomato. So we are going to paint ourselves a cucumber cactus and a tomato-shaped cactus. So the first one's going to be tall, and the second one's going to be short. Your supplies that you're going to need are going to be your background with your flowers on it, your palette, a cup with a little bit of water, and your brush. Now, you can choose to sketch it out just a little bit with your pencil if you aren't confident enough to just come in there and hand paint it. That is totally fine. What would you do in that case would be make sure that it looks like you're coming behind. Start up here first, behind your flower that comes out towards the right. And just very lightly kind of give yourself a little bit of a shape coming out. From both sides. So you guys can kind of see that. I want it to come down to where it's about 1 inch from the bottom. And I would say about 2.5 inches wide, give or take. You guys want to have not too skinny of one because you want them to meet. You don't want a bunch of negative space in the center. We're trying to create a visual focal point for the viewer that leads their eyes to the actual cactus, but gives them an interesting background that makes the cactus kind of pop. So we're of course going to take, and it's going to be green because it's a cactus. Wet your brush, saturate your green really well, just like this. See how well saturated my brush is. Very green, very green. And we'll do a couple coats for here too. So then you're just gonna paint your outline. Make sure you don't paint over top of the flower. It's coming from behind the flower. Remember that perspective. Maybe there's just a little bit showing back there, so I'm gonna fill that in. And you'll probably have to go over this a couple times in order to get that nicely outlined. And then of course we're gonna fill it all the way in. Of course, take your time. I'm doing this so you guys don't have to watch me paint for 15 minutes. Just kind of going quickly. You definitely want to wait till your background is dry. If your background's not completely dry, it will muddy your color. And be mindful to carefully go up against your other colors so that it gives the illusion of that flower being on top once again. So notice I'm going to do this one coat of green, and then I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let it dry a little bit. We do absolutely want it darker than this. We want it covering up the background more than it is right now, but we want it to dry in between. So next, we're going to do this cactus right here. And if you're gonna sketch it, once again, you take your pencil, and this is our short, kind of chunky one. So we're gonna start up here and gently come out to give yourself quite a bit of space coming out here, and you want it to line up down here, so make it nice and big. It's a little flatter on the bottom, just a little, and make sure that it meets. So it's going to be up against the other one. We're going to come around. It's like the shape of a tomato. A little short cactus, short and wide cactus. So we're going to saturate our brush with green again. Do our outline carefully. Once again, you want the flower to look like it's on top, so we don't paint over the flower at all. We're carefully painting behind it with our brush. And I made a little bit that comes behind. See, it's even hard for me if I get it too wet to control that color. It wants to try to go over top of the flower, but we're gonna just really carefully try to keep that from happening. Do not paint over the flower. Paint behind the flower, in between all of your petals and everything. Fill that in. Take your time. Just gently, barely putting that in there. And if you feel like you might get too much on there, you don't have to do this little top. Like I said, I'm trying to create the perspective of the flower being on top of the cactus. Just barely. So I've carefully painted that kind of cucumber shape, kind of tomato shape. And that's our tall and short cactus. And like I said, once you get to the point where this is dry enough, come back in and add another coat. Make sure that you don't see a lot of the background. You're going to see a little, but you want that cactus to really stand out. So we're just going to add another coat. And if you get your brush too wet, it will start taking your background off. Be careful not to get your brush too wet. You want lots of color saturation, but you don't want a soggy brush. So blot that brush in between coats really well as you're adding the color. Same with this one. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of it. Now, just like we did with the flower where we added these accents, these purple accents, we're going to do something similar with the cactuses. So what you're going to do is, remember how we mixed colors. We're going to actually take this blue, saturate it enough so we can pick up some color. Saturate that brush nicely, and you're going to add it to the green. Probably a couple brushfuls. And what you're doing is you're still using a green, but it has made the green a little bit darker. So just like we practiced when we did the line work with the apple, we're going to come from the edge here and we're going to create some dark lines, just like you would see in a cactus. Of course, you're going to want to wait till this is dry. And you're going to add these lines. Otherwise, you're going to get this separation that you're kind of seeing now. But we're just going to add lines that kind of form to the way that the cactus is. Just like that. And we're going to do the same on the short cactus. So once again, add a little blue to your green. Don't get your brush too wet. Wait till those cactuses are a little bit dry. And we'll add lines into them. And notice how I'm forming just like a beach ball or a watermelon. I'm flowing my line with the shape of the cactus in order to create an interesting visual texture. This guides our viewers' eyes to the cactus themselves. Do the same on this side. Notice once again, I'm forming inward. You might have a line in the center. And once this is dry, it's going to look a lot like this one. If you're feeling kind of like you'd like to experiment, you feel like you can add this agave, you can. It's going to be similar to the flower, but laying just slightly flat. If you notice, your center is a little flatter, and you come up with this. I can't really add it right now because this is not dry. You don't have to add that. You can stop with this. If you'd like to try the agave out, go right ahead. Make sure that you're lining it in a little bit different of a color so that you can see it. If you try making it the same exact color as the cactus without the lining, it's really hard to see. It doesn't stand out super well. So if you want to add a little bit of that fuchsia with kind of your blue and line out this agave petals, I can come around and show those of you who would like to do that individually how to add that in.